Welcome to the TA Disruptors podcast. I'm Robert Newry, co-founder and chief explorer at Arctic Shores, the task-based psychometric company that uncovers potential and helps organisations see more in people. Today, we are going to explore the impact of volume applications in the age of AI. Recent survey data shows that the average recruiter is receiving 270% more applications than they were 3 years ago. Some of this is due to change in the job market, but a large part is due to the new AI tools that help candidates apply for jobs while they sleep. Tools like Teal.ai and AI Hawk. And this is straining and in some cases breaking recruitment processes and teams. So who better to speak to about how to deal with this challenge than Jess Morgan, Chief Transformation Officer at talent solutions specialist Instant Impact. Jess has an extensive management consulting background from Capita and Baringa to Centrica, and Instant Impact leads the technology transformation practice, helping organisations enhance their recruitment processes and drive operational efficiency. And no doubt your Lean Six Sigma black belt training and skills are super valuable. So welcome, Jess.
Hello, thank you for having me.
So Jess, let's start with how big a problem is this surge in applications for some of the people that you work with?
Yeah, I mean, there's no getting away from it. It's definitely a problem. We've seen, I was only talking to a few people in the organisation in this last week, and we've seen, things like at one of our energy clients, a sort of low skill remote role get advertised. And in less than 24 hours, we got 2,400 applications.
For one role?
For one role, less than 24 hours.
Goodness me.
There's other anecdotes I tell you across other clients. And, the stats that you said at the beginning, I think point to it. TribePad have also released a study, and I think it was November alone last year, they had a 120% increase in applications across their platform at the same time of a backdrop where they had less roles being advertised.
Yes.
So that can only really tell you one thing, which is there are more people applying and at mass scale.
Yes.
So it's definitely something we have to navigate. It's happening more and more. I think the way that we navigate it is the important bit, and trying not to shy away from the fact that it's going to continue to happen. I don't think we're going to break the cycle of candidates using AI to apply for roles. So yes. I don't think we can avoid it. And I think what we have to do is try and design our systems to support it or screen it out, or however we want to design it is the only way we can, because it's not gonna stop.
It isn't, and you're right. And this is, I think, different from the past.
Yeah.
We have been in situations in the past, particularly after the financial crisis in 2008-9, where we saw a surge in applications, and we brought in systems to deal with that. But now this feels really different. This feels that we've actually got to turn the recruitment process on its head in some ways and re-look at what we're doing and how we're doing it. And it seems to me, and therefore it'd be good to get your perspective on this, that there are two big challenges here. We've just got the volume.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with that volume and deal with that volume in a way that's not introducing bias? And also some of the ways that we used to deal with that volume in terms of benchmarks as well. So what we used to do in terms of screening and the different steps that we used to have in the process. But we also have to think about the whole compliance piece a bit around this too, and what's legal and what's not legal, because AI is changing the obviously the candidate applications, but also how we as recruiters use it. So how are you starting with this? So we've got this big challenge, we've got this massive increase in volumes, systems are not set up really to handle this. So where do you start with some of your clients on this?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the reality is it is not possible for a human to absorb that pace of volume increase. Okay, yes. So you've kind of got two choices, I think, as an organisation. You either kind of heavily restrict the volume of applications you can get, but that probably feels a bit counterintuitive because you want to allow a period of time for the applications to come in to allow for fairness. Or you augment your team massively and you hire lots of people to deal with this problem. But again,
budgets aren't going to...
we're not going to do that. So, I think a lot of organisations and TA functions are then looking at tooling themselves. So AI tooling, for example, we've definitely looked at things like CV and application AI screening tools to support recruiters in defining kind of the categories and parameters for CVs and applications that, yes, I'd like to look at this pile versus this pile's a bit of a maybe. So we don't auto-reject people. That's obviously not compliant. But, okay, I know that the top applicants for this role must be able to demonstrate X, Y, and Z. Can you please put those into a category for me to review first to help me with this huge influx of applications? I think then what we're also seeing is almost introducing another screening step. So I think traditionally it was CV, call, first interview kind of thing, right?
Yes.
Now I think with the volumes, we then are starting to introduce maybe another screening stage, which could be a number of things depending on the appetite of the organisation. It could be a one-way video interview where, it's a little bit harder to use AI to completely kind of generate your answers for you, and some of the tooling can spot that for you and it's built in, so you get a much better flavour for really what the person is able and capable to do for the role. Some additional tooling steps like that, maybe some conversational tooling to sort of screen further down the funnel.
There's a couple of things to unpick in all of that too. There's how the process itself is going to change, but also what are the tools that we think are going to be useful. And so let's go back to the CV screening. So what have you seen that works for this? What are you thinking that actually companies and organisations, TA teams, should be wary about when looking at those type of tools?
So look, we know that there's a whole sea of not good practice tooling in this area, and that's I'm not denying that. I think the due diligence we need to do on tooling is important, and our organisation have gone through a big exercise with legal teams and making sure that our practice is aligned to various compliance kind of legislations. I think what you've got to look out for and understand is anything that is going to make automated decisions for you. So a tool that is going to make a decision on a candidate and then reject them without any human in the loop is something that I would be looking to avoid. I think at each stage you still need to have a human to go in and go, yes, I agree with what's been done there. I'm going to have a look. No, I don't agree with this. So there's still a human that makes the decision, because ultimately otherwise you risk losing maybe good candidates that did apply, because the problem we've got with AI-based applications is they can be quite good quality.
Yes.
Right. So if you then just leave it to a system to make the decision, they're probably going to pick the AI completed applications over maybe the ones that weren't AI completed.
Yes.
Things like typos, all that kind of stuff.
Isn't this part of the challenge, though, that you've got to set criteria up for that? So any system, if it's not making a decision, it's having to make a scoring or ranking in some form or another. So that's set by a human in order to be compliant. Yeah. Get that. But then comes the bit of, well, how is it doing the scoring? So if, for example, which a lot of the CV screening tools do, it's a word match. Because candidates have got access to tools now, and if they know, oh look, I'm applying for this job, you've got to have these words in your application. Brilliant. AI tool that I've got, go and put those words in. Yeah. Get me up the rankings. Yeah.
So again, I would be looking for a tool that doesn't just do word match, because the other challenge with that is if you don't put the right word in, let's say you're someone who has lots of experience in finance, but you don't put the word finance on your CV, and they're looking for a finance role, those word matching tools are going to rule you out. So that's not right. So again, the more sophisticated tools in this area can do a lot more kind of inference and understand like a wider range of understanding and context, rather than just going for one keyword.
Yes.
And so, I've said this on quite a few recent client calls around when you're looking at what you might trial, start small.
Yes.
Have a look at a few providers, see what works for you, check it's compliant, maybe give it a go with run roll and just see how it works in a test environment. I think the other challenge you've got is organizations that want to just implement something and go.
Yes.
And I do think that's a high risk strategy.
Yes.
In this sea where we don't really know exactly what our compliance criteria is in the UK yet.
Yes.
And where we've seen it work best is when we've done it on that kind of approach.
Yes. And I think that, and we'll come back to that point about compliance, and obviously in the UK it's slightly different from the EU, but the EU is a high bar in the EU AI Act, and probably a good place to start at the high bar rather than wherever we might end up in the UK on that. And so understanding the challenges, because obviously you as you were saying earlier, you've looked into this and taken some advice on this, and there clearly is a line that has to be drawn between automation, which is just fulfilling what a human has said in terms of criteria, right to work or got to have a finance certification, as opposed to decision making, which is clearly where the system is making an inference or it is making a decision to auto-reject based on a word match. But it is a bit grayer at that point as to, is an inference still making a decision? So what's your take on, if an application gives you, here's the top 10 CVs out of the 2,400 that have just applied. Don't worry about all the others. Here's the top 10 based on an inference and a match to a job description. Is that some sort of decision being made because you've got 10 that are being put forward and 2,390 that are not?
I think in that example it's ranking, and I think it's you input the strength of the requirement into the system, right? So you could say this is sort of important versus this is almost mandatory.
Yes.
So I think it's then you're still really guiding it. Almost everything you put in then is really human led, and I don't think that the tool is really doing a lot by itself.
Yes.
But back to your point about the compliance piece, we've taken guidance on it because it's really interesting when the EU AI Act is quite clear on the 2 or 3 areas specifically for high risk categories like recruitment, right, where it's people and decision making, and a lot of it is to do with transparency, bias, reducing bias, and not allowing a tool to sort of make a full decision on its own, i.e. human must be in the loop at each stage.
Yes.
And so all the tools that we've chosen basically will allow us to do that and to be involved. I think there are tools out there though that you can almost put applications in and it would put calls in the diary for you, and you don't really know how it got there.
Yes.
The problem with that as well, that might help with efficiency, but then when you, especially in the business of RPO, when you then got to talk to the hiring manager who's the client.
Yes, and explain.
And also that candidate isn't quite what they look like, and you haven't even been part of that process, your credibility is immediately undermined.
Yes.
So, I would say we've taken a relatively cautious approach to it. The reason we wanted to get lots of legal advice was to make sure that we weren't sort of breaking any compliance laws, but also to give reassurance to our clients.
Yes.
Because it's candidates we're engaging on their behalf. So, but let's see what comes. That's the gold standard at the moment. Who knows what's going to come? I think it's pretty soon that they're going to come out with kind of exactly what we should be doing in kind of our sphere, and it could be different.
Yes, and it is rapidly changing from a technology as well as a legal point of view. Although I think the point that you made earlier on this, that there is a starting point that we've got here, is just understanding the difference between automation and AI, where a decision is being made as opposed to where some information is being provided.
Exactly.
And from which a human then makes the decision.
And some of it, to be honest, isn't even AI. I think we use this big word, and actually you look at it and you're like, that's actually just automation that arguably we've been doing in different guises for a few years now, but we're just sort of rebranding it as AI.
Yes.
And then putting in a tool name and going
Yes.
for it. So I'm, there's 3 or 4 different phases, right, with what we're trying to do with AI. There's the sort of AI assistants, which is very much your chatbots, where it's just, you might internally have one for HR requests that says, oh, what's the policy on this? And all it's doing is returning information. That's called AI, but I mean, is it? Then there's more AI agents, but again, what we've been talking about, very human-led, parameters set by humans. Again, you could probably argue that's largely automation. Where we get that, I think is the interesting bit, which I think in recruitment it's very untouched, is then the kind of multi-agent workforce, where that really is taking away whole steps of people's roles.
Yes.
And making decisions and pushing along work. And that, I think, is the area that will really impact the workforce. At the moment, I think it's freeing up some time, yeah, sure, and people can go and do some other stuff. But when you start to, when we start to talk about agents actually going and doing big chunks of work, I see there being a real impact on kind of workforce redesign and,
yes.
How do our roles just look different?
Yes. And let's dive into that a bit, the agents coming, because there's a lot of talk about what roles are going to be around in the future for TA and what's not. And part of the role in TA was to manage the process.
Yeah.
And you've talked about keeping humans in the loop being important to remain compliant. So where I can see some around the scheduling, but you're obviously thinking and feeling that the agentic AI may actually do that first sift. So things like, I assume that they might even do because I've seen, and it'd be interesting to get your take on this, AI avatars that will do an interview rather than a human doing the interview, set in questions and parameters.
Yeah.
And then that information, I suppose, will be sent back to somebody. But is that the kind of thing that you're talking about, that the human doesn't have to be on the phone or doesn't have to look at the video interview?
Well, or, there's different layers of it. I think that could ultimately be the longer term view, maybe, where, you do have more avatars doing certain process steps. But actually, a lot of what we're talking about in sort of agentic AI and recruitment is more like this orchestration layer that will almost perform a lot of the tasks for the TA individual.
Yes.
And so they're really just a checkpoint.
Yes.
So agent goes away and does, I don't know, some
scheduling,
sourcing and scheduling, whatever, comes back, says, are you happy with this? Did I do this right? And then you kind of go, oh, no, actually, I wish you should have gone to that job board. You should have done this. And it learns, goes away, comes back, then presents to you a shortlist. Are you happy with it? Yes. So really the role of the TA person doesn't go away, but it changes. And then potentially, I don't know, more time later down the line for the final few candidates, who knows, or to work on more HR strategy, who knows, like, I don't know where that will go. But I don't know if I think that roles will cease to exist, but I do think fundamentally they will change in terms of purpose, and the way we deliver recruitment will be different. I was just looking this morning, and the Society for Human Resources Management, I think, was saying in 2023, 26% of organisations were using AI in recruitment. 2024, that doubled to about 56%. And I think this year it's going to be something like 75%.
Yes.
So it's a really,
it's rapidly.
It's coming.
It is. It's rapidly. Although, as you mentioned earlier, I think a lot of people are saying they're using AI when in fact they're just using automation.
Yes, that's true. That is true.
We have a little bit of a challenge around all of that. But I like your point about the orchestration piece in this. And so it comes back to if the role of TA is to orchestrate on this, then actually one of the key roles for TA, and to some extent possibly even then for their advisors, is how do I get good advice on this orchestration piece so I don't end up drifting into a decision-making area without realizing it? Because the point that you mentioned earlier is that you can think, oh, I've just got this little feature that's appeared on an ATS, or somebody has said, oh, it does scheduling, but actually also it can do ranking and scoring. And so the challenge for TA is, well, how do I interrogate and know what is going on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Because if you don't know, and in TA we weren't trained to be algorithmic specialists, how do we address that challenge? We might be walking into a tiger trap.
Exactly. And I think this is where a new type of role is spinning out in TA, I think, which is, quite good timing for my sort of industry background. But, like transformation type AI tech consulting roles where, organizations are starting to have this feeling that, AI is coming, or we want to be part of it, but what do we do? As you say, it's not our background. And there's this sort of phrase that keeps going around. So lots of events I've been to recently, which is fear of being obsolete.
Yes.
FOBO. Yes. I'm sure you heard that at Breakfast. That's a great term. Yeah. But it's real. It's sort of like, we need to get on board with this, but where do we start? And so lots of people are either speaking to consultants or internally hiring a role, which is, let's look at our processes, which is our tech stack, and let's see where are the opportunities to leverage what we've already got. Because actually a lot of the software, as you say, ATSs, they do have little bits of AI or automation built into them, but people just aren't leveraging them. I see that classically. It's almost like 101 of going in for a diagnostic to a client. And I'm like, well, before we just wipe out your entire tech stack, let's just have a quick look.
See what capabilities you actually have.
Because actually, that's quite a cool piece of tech you've got there. Are you using it? And actually they're not, because they don't understand, and they need some advice on how they then build their processes and their change agenda around it. So it is, it's a bit of a project really to uncover kind of where you want to use AI, how do you implement it, how does it impact the processes around it, because there's no point really in implementing it but carrying on with exactly the same process, because it's meant to 10x your output and change the way you do stuff. But you need somebody to help design that, I think, if you don't have that someone in your organization who's naturally minded like that. And then what do you do with that time released from the team? What kind of strategic projects could they work on, or can we do more volume and quicker, and all sorts of things.
Yes, and there's a lot of talk around how all these AI tools are going to free up all this time. We can come back to a bit later as to then where does the value of TA come in. But let's just go back to the how do you do the transformation, because you've got this, on the one hand, we've got to start small. We've got to have a little try out somewhere, see that we understand AI, we understand actually what it means, where it fits in the process. And then at the same time, we've got to turn the process on its head, because it's not fit for purpose now. The process was designed for a very different world that we live in. So how would you advise somebody that is thinking, they're saying, okay, I've done a little bit of experimentation with AI. I feel I'm comfortable now with the orchestration piece where it's low risk and I can implement it. But now I need to change my recruitment process, because if you tinker with lots of little experiments, you'll end up with a Frankenstein's monster.
And also unintended consequences down the line or whatever. So, exactly. I mean, it needs to be carefully structured. Is the reality of it. I've got quite a agile approach to these things, because there'll be areas where mistakes are made and you go, actually, maybe we should change that a little bit, or, and you don't want to be too regimented on it, because as I said, it's such a greenfields area. There'll be some tools you might try and go, no, not for us, that didn't work. And that's okay, as long as you haven't committed your whole organization to it straight away. But I think once you know a couple of tools potentially, or sort of tech strategies that you want to go with, it needs to be a structured program of work effectively, where you look at your sort of org design. Are people doing the right roles to go with these processes? Do you have the right technical expertise to run some of the orchestration? Who's going to implement it? Because otherwise what will happen is it'll fall over. The other thing I think is really important to call out, that is so easily forgotten, and I've come into this many times doing management consulting because it's a similar thing. It's a change program. You're saying, well, fundamentally we're going to change the way we do this part of the process, or how we interact with candidates here, to people who for their whole life as TA professionals, as you say, have
done it in one way.
We've done it in one way, typically probably quite manually, and actually it's been part of the amazing part of their role is to really interact with every stage of the journey and spend time reviewing everything. So you can't just assume that lands and is really quickly adopted. So that is a really big part, I think, at the beginning of any of this. If you're planning to do something quite fundamental to your process, how do we get people on board? How do we train them to use the tooling? What do they do with their time? And that is the piece I think is quite often missed. People get really excited about tech, and transforming and let's buy it, let's do it. But it will, I think there's some stats around 85% of AI projects will fall over in the first year because it's not run as a bigger change piece.
Yeah, and I think that's so important because I mean, you come from a management consulting transformation background, and one of the things that always surprises me is, and I suppose it's sort of natural human psychology around all of this, which is, let's get a bit of tech, and I've been sold by the vendor on this that it's going to be transformed. I'm going to get a 10x return, and then I'll put it in, and I'll expect the rest of the process just to get better to work, as opposed to, hang on, well, we've understood how the tech can work a bit, but actually now we need to change the process. We need to get, I often talk about the golden thread, from here's the output, a quality hire, and we can have a whole discussion about, quality of hire and what that looks like in the future, because it's going to be different from the past. But then you've got to work back to the application piece on that. And if that golden thread as a process doesn't work, it doesn't matter how much tech you put in and AI you put in there, is going to be automating a process that isn't fundamentally got a golden thread and working in the first place.
Exactly. And in our line of work, right, we've got so many stakeholders to keep on board: the candidate, the hiring manager, the business, all these other kind of stakeholders. And so that's another place that I think is really important to start on any of this. Is this ultimately going to deliver us quality of hire?
Yes.
Is the candidate going to love us throughout the journey? Because also our brand, we want to get the best candidates, but also is it going to be easier for the hiring manager?
Yes.
Because again, if you create a process that is really hard for the hiring manager, it's going to be difficult to make it land.
Yes.
But there's a whole skills piece there as well, because if you're expecting the hiring manager to interact with quite a tech-enabled process that potentially they weren't before, you cannot assume that that's going to be easy.
Absolutely. And you make such a good point there, because I've seen quite a few cases where TA gets very excited, understandably, about something that's going to really improve their efficiency and the value that they provide to hiring managers. And then a hiring manager has not been bought into this process, or as a group they've not been bought into it, and so that they're looking at it going, well, how's this made your life easier? It's not necessarily made my life easier, and then it starts to fall apart. Yeah,
and you've got the trade-off of all the different stakeholders, but then the end game, of course, to be more efficient, to be able to do maybe more with less, is also sadly the backdrop of quite a lot of this as well. So it's an interesting one, and we're keeping close to all the lessons learned across the different transformations that we do.
Yes.
But outside of instant impact, management consulting wise, as you touched upon, the successful ones are where you've got probably someone a bit dedicated to seeing the kind of program of work through. So from a people side, from a process side, and tech side.
Yes.
Because all three things need to kind of run concurrently and be looked after by somebody who is not just sort of like side of desk whilst they're also doing X, Y, Z.
Yes.
And that's typically where we see successful deployments.
Yes. And I've come across, and I'd be interested to get your take on this, a job role in TA now. In one definition, it's called a TA enablement manager. I've also heard it referred to as a rec ops manager. But fundamentally, the requirement is that point person, whose job is to go, right, what are the actual needs here? What are the processes here? Let's get that all agreed, stakeholders aligned, all of this. And then we'll go and look at the tech. We might be looking at existing tech and tweaking some of that. Is that the kind of thing that you think is going to be really important? Because you can't change this overnight. This is going to be over several years. And so you're going to need somebody whose job is not being taken with firefighting. I've got another 10 recs now. I need them hired next week. Yeah. Off you go. You actually need somebody who's focused on this transformation.
Yes, and probably quite a central resource.
Yes.
Who can work across, for RPO businesses, obviously you've got lots of different client teams. Somebody that can be like a relatively impartial
Yes.
View across all the processes and just know best practice and come and try and kind of implement it and not get kind of bogged down with client specifics or whatever it might be, because the bigger picture here is, what as an organisation do we think that we should leverage and transform. I think the other bit, not to forget as well, is the strategy. So I think there has to be alignment at a senior level on what is the strategy around AI and tech. Do we want to be really tech enabled? Do we want our people to be leveraging technology in every rec that they do?
Yes.
And we're going to get rid of Excel and we're going to say we only use the ATS or whatever it might be.
Yes.
And everybody has to be bought into that, because it's quite painful to move from old world to new world.
Yes.
So you absolutely need
some senior impetus to
and buy-in, and then a role to drive it.
Yes.
And then of course the business has to be bought in, and that's part of the change program. But I think that strategy around AI as well, because I speak to clients sometimes and maybe the TA lead's like, yeah, definitely want to try this and this. We need it. My team are crying out for it. And then I might speak to somebody else on the leadership team who's really nervous about AI. We're never going to do that. We're breaking all sorts of compliance laws. Never going to happen. And so I think setting your position as an organisation on this is what we believe we are comfortable to do in terms of AI and our principles, and everyone's aligned behind that, and the same with transformation, is a good place to start.
Yes, and you make a great point about, the stakeholders is now includes a data privacy officer in a way it didn't before. I mean, we've obviously got GDPR, but under the EU AI Act, similar kind of fines if you're found in breach of that to GDPR.
Yeah.
And so a key stakeholder now is your data privacy officer. So you can have a strategy to go and adopt AI everywhere, but if they're not on board with how you are working within the confines of whatever legislation or jurisdiction you want to work with, and you haven't understood those, then the whole thing, your whole strategy and your whole tech roadmap can be thrown out the window.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is, almost every company you speak to now does have a DPO.
Yes.
That didn't used to be the case.
Yes.
It used to be you might kind of call on a fractional DPO from a different company once every 6 weeks and just check a few things.
It's so fundamental.
Now, it's like one of the first things that I did when I joined my role was to kind of formalise somebody in my team as the DPO. We had DPO support, don't get me wrong, but as that key person and in my team, because a lot of what we're doing is driving tech transformation AI. We have to know inside out what is okay, what's not okay, speaking to the lawyers all the time about it, making sure the business is trained on what's okay and what's not okay.
Yes.
So actually it made sense for it to sit in my world rather than be this kind of outsourced, support I didn't really know anything about. But yeah, I mean, it's the EU AI Act is interesting because it's seen as the gold standard. So it, in theory, should be what we
will aim for.
What we will aim for, but no one quite knows how it's going to be kind of legislated for in the UK.
Yes, and so we'll have to figure that out as we go along on that one. But there's no harm in preparing.
I think you're better off going high,
exactly.
and then being able to revert back if you wanted to.
Exactly. That's certainly the advice that I give. And so that's fascinating about then the process and the transformation, and people have to think about that different point person to make that work. And then what about the candidate in all of this? Because we're doing all of this to create efficiencies. We've got to do more with less. We have just got to deal with the volumes. But often I talk about the moral contract that used to exist between a candidate and a recruiting organisation, which is, I put all this effort into your recruiting process, you're going to put me through these various steps, and my expectation, and therefore the moral contract, is if I put all the effort in, I expect to see somebody, a human, respecting that effort. So if we drive all this efficiency and we make it more automated, and increasingly we use AI to screen a CV, however clever that is, or we use AI avatars to do the initial phone screen on this, are we breaking the moral contract with the candidate on this? And they're just going to be going, well, if you're just going to be a computer automated process, then I'm just going to use whatever tech I can get my hands on to try and break
Yeah.
your process, because we don't have a moral contract anymore now.
Yes, I think in some roles and in some processes, yes. So I think the first thing is there is no blanket approach to this, right? There isn't a right, well, once we decide we're going to use AI, it has to be on every single role, every single client, and that's it. Don't care how personalised we want to make it. I think you've got to target the right kind of roles for sure. Typically high volume, as we were discussing, and maybe the slightly more kind of like entry level or lower skilled, all those kinds of roles. What we are seeing actually is that position can be quite a misconception in some of the roles, where maybe like the next generation are typically the people who are applying for them, and where we've used AI and there's like a conversational chatbot as a bit of a screening / FAQ tool, which is essentially WhatsApp, and they can ask some questions, we can ask some questions, but it's 24/7. And we get really positive feedback because people might be Saturday night and they've applied for the role and they immediately hear back. And they're thinking, I wanted to ask about the salary, but I didn't want to ask in the email to the recruiter, but I can just ask this chatbot, cool. And they're way more comfortable with that. And then already on Monday, they've got an interview scheduled, for example. So they prefer it, and we're finding that, they are going through the process quicker, so it feels just like a more pacey process. Typically, they might get more personalised feedback because a recruiter will get access to that information from let's say one of the tools and be able to give real reasons to a candidate because they're not having to manually figure it all out themselves from an application process. So in some roles we're actually seeing it actually
can make it much better.
They prefer it, and we get quite good kind of NPS scores through the process. I would not recommend doing it on potentially some really niche executive hiring type roles where it's all about building a relationship from day one, because maybe your application volumes aren't going to be naturally that high and you actually want to headhunt or whatever it might be. So I think you have to pick the right roles. But I think it's commonly expected now definitely for sort of the next generations coming through to interact with technology.
That it's going to be
and AI
automated in some way.
And that's really common, they're using it in universities, they're using it in schools, they're using it in games, gamified assessment type stuff. So I think if you get it right, and you still obviously have to have a human at some point, I don't think it necessarily has to be a negative for a candidate.
Yes, and I suppose the trick to all of this is being clear.
Yes, and honest about it.
And honest about it, that's right, and upfront that you are going to be dealing with an AI type of tool for the first bit, but you'll get more feedback from it, you'll get faster movement through the process if you're the right fit, and then you'll get to a human. Yeah,
and the other funny kind of anecdote, I guess, from where we've seen it working, part of transparency is you have to put on their sort of job ad, AI will be using this process or whatever. And in there it says, if you disagree with this and you want to speak to somebody, here, call this number, or here's an email address, or whatever it is. I don't think we've had one person do that.
Really?
Not one person.
They've just accepted, this is fine, you've been upfront about it.
Exactly. So that's interesting. Now, I'm sure some people say, well, that you probably already alienated them, so they just didn't bother. But we haven't seen sort of a mass drop-off or anything concerning to the point where I'd be like, right, we need to stop doing this. But we have been quite targeted about where we use it and
how you use it.
And how we use it,
Yes. Fascinating. And what about, because I know, and we work together, we'll be working together on a client on this, about how you set candidates up for success when using technology on this, because video interviews and the high volume one is something that a lot of people will be using, but we're suffering from a kind of sea of sameness of everybody reading out from a script in order to get through that stage. So have you got any tips and advice from having done this as to how you avoid that sea of sameness?
I think
challenge?
there's a bit of education, isn't there, with the invite to the video interview. So I think that the example that you're giving, that there's going to be a bit of a video for those candidates that says, here's how to do a really good video interview. And it basically says, don't read off a script because it's really obvious.
Yes.
Of course have your pointers. We like that you prepare, but actually it comes off really nice if you're authentic. And, you know, so giving some tips about basically what will probably alienate the reviewers versus what reviewers like.
Yes.
I think in terms of then, if the question would be around, how do you know it's not an AI avatar answering the questions for someone? Because those things do exist.
Yes.
You know, the technology is pretty good at basically being able to identify that and identify people sort of try and leave or whatever it might be, and can call it out to you. So that's also a really good way of making sure it's the right person answering the right questions. And I've used those, those platforms for other clients before as well. And it's very easy to spot when people are just reading line by line, because you can see their eyes, the answers are kind of way too buzzword bingo, and you kind of think, well, people don't actually talk like that when they're talking authentically. I think give guidance. The other thing is giving time. So we tend not to be too strict about how long people have to answer it or not being able to re-record it, but equally not too much time and not too many re-records, because
you've got to get a balance between that. Yes. And I think it's just being sympathetic to the candidate's situation on that one, because I feel that if you don't give good guidance, and it's partly through an email invite, it's partly through the introduction when they do it, but it's also, I think, through the career site as well, then candidates don't know that they're falling foul of something. So if you're dyslexic or dyspraxic, you might feel more comfortable in front of a screen is if in some cases people don't feel comfortable in front of a video screen and they want to read something out because they feel nervous when they've got a camera pointing at them, and so we can't just rule somebody out because they've read something, because that actually might be an aid, but we have to be clear, and they have to declare it.
And what's cool about the tools is obviously you don't have to, we call it video interviewing, don't we? But it does have the option to do voice only. If you said someone's uncomfortable with it. And then also to put in, if you've got sort of special requirements that would mean that maybe you'd have slightly longer videos, or as you said, no video, or whatever it is. So giving people the space to sort of say that and not be ruled out is obviously really important for the sort of bias angle as well.
Yes. So we've got to give good guidance training to TA teams. We've got to give good guidance training to candidates on this. And we probably have to do the same for hiring managers as well, don't we? Do you get involved in that too, as to how we explain to them that AI is going to make life better, but they've got to come on board with all of this?
I think that is probably one of the more challenging areas, to make it feel valuable to everybody. So we've just had a bit of a company kind of away conference where a big theme was AI, and I did the big, here's the macro picture on AI and here's all the cool stuff we could do, but actually on a day-to-day basis, how can you as an individual see the value? And it wasn't talking about all the big kind of cool AI tools. It was talking about, how can I compose this proposal in 1 second by typing a prompt in, or and the examples we used, we made sure were quite tailored to different individuals around the business depending on what their role was, and it really landed well. We ended up doing a hackathon where everyone had to generate and build a product in the space of about an hour, which is obviously hilarious. It's not nearly long enough, but it was to get the excitement. And I think for hiring managers, for our clients, I'm recommending, do transformation workshops. It could be led by us because we're there, we work with them, but even internally, you run it and you get people excited about it, and you start to spot opportunities. And then you do have to teach people, because if you have never used it before, it's not natural to you to just sort of start leaning on AI to do this, and this, or to trust it even. It's definitely a kind of hand-holding process, I think, to show someone the value. And then for us, I think where I've seen the most impact on our organisation has been when we can then show the results. So, when we've been able to do case studies for clients where we said, right, well, we did roll out this technology here and we changed the process a bit. We got the team on board, and look, they've managed to reduce their time to hire by 50%. They've got a candidate engagement score up of however many, and we're running more roles, but we haven't had to massively augment the team. All those are great great case studies that you can't really get away from, and that's when I then get people send me messages going, oh, can I hear a bit more about this? Can we try it? So it has to sort of like show its worth as well, like proof in the pudding kind of thing.
And I think having those workshops to start with to give people confidence, and that is really important, because one of the things I came across is almost a shadow use of AI by hiring managers, where they go, oh look, I've got these candidates here, I've got the CVs now, I'm just going to put that through AI now and ChatGPT to give me some things to call out from their CVs or match it to some prompts, and you get this kind of shadow activity, and they don't know that actually what they're doing is potentially very, very bad. It's breaking GDPR for starters. But that's again part of where the training comes in, is that yes, we want everybody to be using AI, but this is good use and bad use from a hiring manager's perspective as much as it is from TA and candidates.
And I mean, rule 101 is do not put any personal data through especially through the kind of like free tools. You can get your kind of, if you're on sort of enterprise packages, it tends to be, it's secure because it's just your environment. But people don't know that. Why would you know that? And so that's what I mean about the grey area of compliance. I think there's a lot of stuff that people will be doing that they don't know they're doing wrong, and the unintended consequences we won't know for a while.
That's right.
And then the legislation will come down hard on us, and suddenly people will realise they've been making mistakes. But so I mean, my team's role really is to try and get ahead of that on behalf of the company and say, right, these are things we definitely cannot do. And train everyone.
So final question is, having sort of gone through all of that, and you obviously run a few workshops and you've seen some case studies, where are the one or two areas of AI and automation that you have seen that have given, you talked about a 50% improvement in time to hire, so where have you seen this being most effective?
I think it's that top funnel part of the process, really. So I think it's maximizing automation where you can in the kind of like sourcing part of the funnel, and being able to like nurture people and get back to people and make it personalized and relevant to them through automated sequencing. But then I think it's the screening part, getting it right and tailoring it. You can really narrow down the time spent on reviewing applications, speaking to people who weren't ever the right people anyway, and then putting forward the right people for the right roles. But also keeping maybe the sort of the silver medalist type candidates warm. Doing all of that as an individual human, sometimes it's just not possible. AI can help you do that, and so that I think is a real benefit, because you can do more with one person, and the output is stronger. And then things like just the manual task scheduling. We should not be in a world where people are manually scheduling invites. There's many tools out there. There's nothing wrong with that compliance wise.
It is. I think that's where everybody should start. Really, it's such an easy one to then start getting familiar with how these tools work.
And they all connect with your ATSs these days, and so that's for me probably where I would look to start, and be very intentional about what you choose and make sure it's going to help you in your process, and you're not just going over the shiny thing that's got good marketing.
Yes, absolutely. Well, you've given some really helpful thoughts to people about how to identify what is more than just a shiny tool, and thinking about how that plays into the process. So Jess, as always, it's been fascinating talking to you, and thank you for taking the time to come on the podcast and share such great insights.
Thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you.